When you hear about good Sega Genesis platformers, what names do you usually hear? Sonic the Hedgehog, Vector Man, ToeJam and Earl, Castle of Illusion, Earthworm Jim, and so many others. But have you ever heard of Seas Havok? Seas Havok is a platformer that requires old-school dedication. It's a game that puts your platforming skills to the test, and if you aren't ready, it will try to defeat you. Seas Havok was released in 1993 for the Sega Genesis, and released in 1994 for Japan as Captain Lang, and in Europe as Captain Havok. The North American and Japanese releases were handled by Data East, and the European release by Codemasters. While walking along the beach, adventurers Havok and his sidekick Tide come across an unconscious woman. Taking her back to their house, she awakens and tells them her name is Bridget and she was escaping from the ruthless pirate Bernardo, a power-hungry captain who's after a treasure that will grant the holder the power to destroy armies. Bridget escaped with the map to the treasure and asks of you to hide it and help protect her. But under the cover of night, Bridget and Tide are kidnapped and it is up to Havok to rescue his friends. Seas Havok is a product of the times. Anthropomorphic animals main character? Check. Collectible items that increase lives when they hit 100? Check. High platforming difficulty? Check. This game takes a look at the Sonic the Hedgehog playbook and tries to make it its own, focusing less on speed and more on precise platforming, which does lead to some stress-inducing levels later on. Learning how Havok moves is how you'll get through the game, that and a lot of trial and error. For example, if Havok gets hit, he takes the Castlevania approach and usually gets knocked back, which can put Havok in worse situations. But the controls are easy enough to understand. A, B, and C all do the same thing, jump. And if you hit the button again in the air, you will do a flipper flip that hits an enemy directly in front of it. Crouching while hitting any of these buttons will result in a roll, which becomes very important in dodging attacks and is vital to learn if you want to beat the game. This is one of those games where if you want to make it to the end, you must memorize one-up locations, know if you can get extra lives before a boss, die over and over again, learning platforming locations and boss patterns. According to the manual, Havok was supposed to collect continues to have the ability to continue, but lucky for us, they didn't implement this. So we can continue as much as we want, starting from the beginning of the level we were on when we lose all our lives. But even if this does alleviate some of the annoyances of dying, it might be best to take breaks from the game every so often. That's why it took me 3 days to beat it without turning the console off. Because as mentioned before, this game relies on precise platforming in high difficulty. They do take the pressure off somewhat by Havok having a health bar, allowing for multiple hits before death, and you have several opportunities to replenish your health, with small chicken legs or big pieces of roast ham. But even with these extra hits, it's expected you may die quite a bit, due to the trial and error nature of the game. So in continuing the platforming legacy, you will have collectible diamonds that give you an extra life after you collect 100 of them. Collecting goblets and treasures from chests will give you 10 diamond points and 50 diamond points respectively. Besides collecting these items, there are also mini Havok dolls and chests that give you 1 extra life each. The last collectible item is the magic boots that grant Havok the ability to run faster, and with that the momentum to jump higher as well, allowing you to get to some locations that would be hard to get to otherwise. If you ever run out the clock, you will die. The in-game clock counts upward to 10 in-game minutes. Once you hit the 10-minute mark, you will lose a life. This does become annoying on some levels like this, where your platforming depends on waiting for a block to possibly move in the right direction or acting recklessly. Luckily, along with extra lives, there are checkpoints that are the blue spinning balls that turn red when touched. So when you die, you will start from that location, unless you meet a boss. When you meet a boss and die, you will be placed in a spot right before the boss area, and you will not be allowed to backtrack for more lives. Like most bosses in games, it's all about learning boss patterns, and then learn not to get hit, and possibly learn how to exploit the amount of hits on the boss. The main obstacle is memorizing the patterns and not falling for the same mistakes. If you learn the enemy movements, it will become a little bit more easier. When I talk about the game's difficulty, I have to mention that there's a chance to change the difficulty in the main menu before starting the game, to easy, normal, hard, or expert. I believe the difficulty affects the amount of damage you will receive from enemies. For example, if you want to try expert, you really do have to become an expert, because it is 1 hit and you are dead. But be warned, if you want to try the game on easy, you will only have access to the first 5 levels before telling you to try playing the game again on normal, which was a common practice back in the day with games like Golden Axe and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. The main complaint I've heard about this game is the difficulty spike. It would be accurate to say that the first 5 levels that easy mode allows you are the easiest of all the levels. Then after that it becomes a sharp curve upward. That has made me curse over and over and over again. But I have to defend it as an old school game that wants you to play it again and again until you memorize the levels. It's the sort of game that you'll get hours of gameplay from, even if I've seen a person on YouTube beat it in under an hour on Expert. The presentation of this game is beautiful. The multi-layered backgrounds, the varied locations, the sound design, the music. The music that you've been listening to throughout this review I think is fantastic. They worked hard to make a long and varied soundtrack that works well to fit each of the locations and the pirate theme. They loved their music so much they gave it its own menu on the start screen. Within the orchestra menu you will see our hero Havok conducting an orchestra, and they will play whatever song you choose. This touch to detail gives me the impression that Data East was really into making this game special. Apart from what I've already mentioned about the visuals, it's a game with a lot going on. The distorted flaming background in the burning hamlet, the aurora borealis above Mount Chester, the lightning and cave effects at Fort Bernardo, and so much more. This is a game brimming with detail, and I love it so much more for it. Seas Havok is a game I remember from my childhood. Being so hard it took me a while to get past the second level, but I think that says more about my skills back then than anything else right now. It's rare for me to choose a hard game and keep with it till the end, but it speaks volumes of what kind of game it is for me to put myself through the burden of dying multiple times over several days. It's the kind of game that pops with personality, from its music, its locations, its gameplay, its heart. Seas Havok is a third-party game that often gets passed over due to the difficulty spike, but I think that's what should get it more recognition in this day and age. People complain that games today aren't as hard as they were in the past, and they want that challenge. Well, I say, why hold this sort of difficulty against a game, and go back and try a classic like Seas Havok? This game, I know, isn't for everyone. The difficulty spike will scare off most, but I feel that if a person like me can sit down, appreciate its charm, and then power through to see more, it's worth it for an old school platformer to gain more recognition. The cheapest I've seen Seas Havok going for online is around $10 to $15. Thanks for watching. Any feedback on this video or any of my other videos would be appreciated. If you want to get in contact with me, message me on YouTube or Twitter. And if you want to see any of my previous work or my last reviews, click the links provided.